Welcome to Securing America with me, Frank Gaffney, the program that's a kind of owner's manual for protecting the country we love against all enemies, foreign and domestic, to the glory of God and his kingdom. We couldn't be more pleased to have with us Rod Martin, the proprietor of rodmartin.org and the architect of its very impressive Rod Martin Reports, which I strongly encourage you to subscribe to. That's just one of his activities. He's a very active businessman and entrepreneur. He cut his teeth with PayPal in the early days of its mafia. He also was a policy advisor to then Governor of Arkansas, Mike Huckabee. He is the chairman of the board of our Institute for the American Future, for which we are profoundly grateful, as well as a faithful contributor to this program and also to our Committee on the Present Danger China. Rod, it's great to have you with us as always. Welcome back, sir.
Always good to be here.
I'm anxious to catch up with you on a number of things, including several that are loosely, at least, if not very directly tied to the World Economic Forum's conclave in Davos, Switzerland in the past couple of days. The President of the United States was there as we speak yesterday, made a big speech. What are your thoughts about what he said in Davos and how it was received, sir?
Well, the first and foremost thing, of course, is that everybody's headline was Donald Trump renounces the use of force against Greenland. And it's like Donald Trump was never going to use force against Greenland. Have you people just not been around for the last 10 years? Do you not know how this man negotiates? You would think somebody would have noticed how these always play out. He swings for the fences. He gives these maximal goals. I wouldn't even necessarily call them demands in a lot of cases, and freaks everybody out, gets their attention on something they otherwise wouldn't pay attention to, and negotiates exactly the deal he intended to from the beginning. So we'll see what comes of that. A framework deal has been announced, but not with any significant detail yet. But it's very clear. Mark Rutte did a great job of pointing out. He's the Secretary General of NATO. He is like, look, the Americans are completely correct about the need for us to pay attention to Arctic security, which we are not doing. And so I thought it was very encouraging. But beyond that, we saw some pretty important things happen in Trump's speech. The first being...
Before we leave just the topic of the negotiations, because as we speak, I think this framework is still mostly an abstraction. There have been some complaints that it was negotiated, if there is such a thing, with this Secretary General of NATO and not with either the Danes or the Greenlanders. Is that likely to be something that will bring it a cropper when they become part of the conversation, do you think, Rod?
I kind of doubt it. I mean, we just had the foreign ministers of Denmark and Greenland. I didn't realize Greenland had a foreign minister, but nevertheless they do. And both of them were just in Washington and formed this working group with Marco Rubio to sort out the matter. And then we have Davos and we have the meetings there. So I really think they had to have been involved in the process. And at the end of the day, Trump is exactly right. The problem is that Denmark can't possibly defend this essential real estate. And Trump said something that nobody has really been pointing to in his speech. He said, look, you don't defend leases, you defend things you own. Well, everybody's like, oh, he's an aggressor. He's trying to take things. No, he's not thinking about the next 4 years. He's thinking about the next 40 years. When we see the British, we have a change of government there. Suddenly we've got Keir Starmer running the place, and he's ready to give our most important base in the Indian Ocean, Diego Garcia, indirectly to the Chinese. Just hand it to Mauritius, which is completely in China's orbit, And all of a sudden, what are we going to do? Because it's just a matter of time until we lose that. And we're going to have Chinese spying on it to a degree that we've never had to deal with before. And it's stupid. The Chagosians don't even want this deal. And Starmer is paying Maldives to take the islands, which is just absurd. So if that can happen now, what happens in 20 or 30 years if some of these NATO countries are suddenly Francistan and Germanistan and Denmarkistan, and we aren't friends, and there isn't a NATO, and Greenland becomes an actual flashpoint? None of that is okay. And Trump drew the picture out for them very clearly for anyone who had eyes to see.
Well, good on him. And let's hope that what comes out of it is, in fact, a satisfactory arrangement. But it sounded to me as though it was heading towards a lease of some kind, which may not be for the reasons that you've just mentioned. We'll be following it closely, as will you. And again, you had a terrific report on all of this at Rod Martin Reports. You can find it at rodmartin.org. So, Rod, please finish your thoughts about the rest of the speech and important points the president made in its course.
Well, those are the most important pieces, of course, but he went further. You know, the real issue we're seeing, and we're seeing it in the Middle East, of course, we're seeing it with more tightly integrating Japanese and South Korean shipbuilding into the U.S. industrial economy. We're seeing it with the uppowering of those two countries' militaries, but especially Japan's. We're seeing it with the largest ever arms deal for Taiwan. Everywhere you look, you see Trump obviously emphasizing American defense industry because we want more good jobs here, we want more manufacturing here. All of that is true, but that's not really the goal. And he laid it out clearly in Davos. We want you to be partners, not dependents. We want you to actually carry your weight and pay your fair share. We're talking about 31 other allies in NATO who collectively pay less than 30% of the bill for defending the alliance. It's just absurd. And when they tried to make some big show of force in solidarity with Denmark, they sent like 15 troops to Greenland for a couple days, flew them in business class, flew them out business class. It's a joke. It's like a Mad Magazine strip. It's ridiculous. So Trump is pushing them, and Ruta made a really good point. None of the things that are positive would be happening apart from Trump. They're now paying their 2% of GDP for defense. That's a good start. They're now all on board except Spain for 5%, which would dramatically increase the power of the alliance, and still America would be dominant. And this is the thing. The people who think Trump is trying to withdraw from the world are absolutely smoking crack. That's not what he's doing. He's making friendly countries stronger so that we're better together, and in the process, shifting responsibility for their regions partially back to them. It's a maturing process. It's good for them. It's good for us.
And we will be watching closely how it actually evolves in the days ahead, because not least we had the leftist, shall we say, Prime Minister of Canada also making a speech at Davos in which he basically said, oh, that whole American world order is so yesterday, and now we little middle nations are going to have to come together and it appears find their way between the great powers of the United States and China. I think he may have had in mind Russia as well, but certainly China, with whom he seems to have just surrendered his country rather fulsomely. So we have to take a break, Rod Martin. We're going to talk a little bit more about Canada, and also what is likely to come of this new world order for America. We're back, and so is Rod Martin, our friend and colleague among other places, at the Institute for the American Future. I mentioned it earlier, but please check out the work we do there at usfuture.org and consider making this program possible by your donation there, please. Rod, we've been talking about a variety of things. I did want to just quickly finish off on Canada and the deal that the Prime Minister, who is bemoaning the collapse, it would appear, of the U.S. so-called dominated rules-based order, who has just made a rather sweeping security as well as strategic partnership with our mortal enemy, and Canada's, I would argue, the Chinese Communist Party. What are we to make of that, sir?
Well, it's about what we would expect from people like Mark Carney and Keir Starmer. And Starmer is better, certainly, which is just remarkable to me, all things considered. I mean, it's like saying, Jeremy Corbyn is better than somebody. But still, Carney is a full-on globalist. This is a man who absolutely believes that unaccountable international elites should be running everything with no input from you, riffraff. And that's exactly how he's aligned. If he can't get that in Davos, if he can't get that from Brussels somehow, if he can't work out something with a Joe Biden or Barack Obama, then he turns to a new sugar daddy in Xi Jinping. Well, there are limits to what he can do with that. First of all, he has NATO obligations that are going to be a little hard to ignore. Second, he actually is a prime minister and not an autocrat, and so there are democratic limits on this. But there are also just practical ones. Let's say they want to redirect oil shipments from the U.S. over to China. Well, they're going to have to build a pipeline across the Rocky Mountains that Mark Carney's government has been consistently opposed to. Now they say they're going to do it, but oh wait, there are all these, what they call up there, First Nations who are opposed to it. And they're just going to get kneecapped in litigation in the ridiculous Canadian court system. So if they push this too far, they're likely to have an election result that Carney doesn't like. If they try to push much farther than that, they could provoke Alberta separation, which is now on the ballot and actually polling pretty decently for this early in the process. If Canada lost Alberta, either as an independent country or as the 51st state, Canada doesn't have any way to pay the bills. Everybody else in Canada is just living off welfare paid for by Alberta. And if Saskatchewan went with them, they really have a problem even feeding themselves. So, these things are all daggers at the heart of the Canadian Confederation. And if you don't think Donald Trump will encourage those if Carney gets too far out of line, you're just crazy.
Right. So, Rod, when is the election in Alberta? Do you know?
I don't know the date. They did get it certified to go on the ballot. And of course, there's a pretty active independence campaign going. Now, independence would be the first step. They're not just going to become the 51st state straight from being a province of Canada. But my guess is the logic there is similar, though not exactly the same, as with Greenland. Greenland wants to be independent, but it really can't afford it. Embassies are expensive. Militaries are expensive. Just having a foreign ministry go be part of the United Nations is expensive. So, for Greenland, it would make sense to be in a compact of free association with us in the way that Palau and the Marshall Islands are. We've done this with island countries before. With Alberta, they don't have as much financial need, but it still makes sense to be part of the biggest market on the planet and the one that buys nearly all of their products. So I think we might have a pathway to that, and I'm sure that if these things happen in relatively quick order, the president will be doing whatever he can to see to that.
Let me pivot to Iran, another hot topic. In the past month or so, we've seen these demonstrations across the country in which people were very courageously moved by economic as well as ultimately, I think, social and political issues, standing against the regime, calling for its downfall, and were massacred in sizable numbers. There are now multiple reports that it's upwards of 25,000. And that, I don't think, counts the numbers that were murdered after they were wounded, let alone those that are being rounded up and executed after the demonstrations have been tamped down. The president had made a number of professions of solidarity with the people of Iran, and actually, I think, encouraged them to be in the streets, had indicated that he was going to come to their assistance if they were being shot. That didn't really work out. Where are we at this point, Rod? And are we likely to see this regime remain in power and continue to be a threat to us as well as other interests we have in the region and beyond?
Well, if we watch cable news, this is all over and Trump chickened out or whatever, or Trump got his chain yanked by somehow a combination of the Israelis and Qatar and whoever. I don't think that's what's happening at all. By my count, the USS Abraham Lincoln is something between 60 and 72 hours from the Persian Gulf. That's not accidental, and it's really consequential. We also just moved an amphibious assault ship into theater. It's a long way from the Middle East, and I can't imagine that we would use it with Iran, but it's not insignificant. And a lot of things are moving around. So what we're hearing is that the Defense Department has been looking at relatively restrained strikes that show support, but don't do anything draconian. But the president keeps asking for battle plans that would be, in his word, decisive. So I actually think that the fact that he did not say one word about Iran in his Davos speech should be taken very ominously by the Ayatollah. I think that's the calm before the storm, and I think we're about to see something pretty dramatic. Maybe we won't, but that seems to be what's getting set up. And you'll recall that with Venezuela, the president got his ducks in a row for months before he actually did something, and it was a something they did not announce.
Right. So, Rod, I think there are observers, we've had some of them on this program, that are very concerned that we may have exhausted the willingness of the people of Iran to muster out, and without them, taking decisive action becomes much more challenging. Are you basically saying that, well, they've been bloodied, but all the reasons that put them in the streets in the first place, including all the economic ones, are still present, and they will come back out if they see us taking decisive action?
I think so. And look, the people hate this regime. This is a wildly unpopular regime. That's before you get to the ethnic differences. Iran is about half foreign. It's only about half Iranian. And these people are willing to be part of Iran, but they're not happy about being under tyrants. The chants in the streets were for the return of the Shah. And this most recent protest we just saw broke out in one of the most conservative neighborhoods of Tehran. So this is all encouraging. I don't know how we get to the end result, but I think Donald Trump is trying.
All right. This is a point in which we will return, I'm sure. Rod Martin, thank you for all your great work. Come back to us next week if you would.
Thank
Be right
you.
back, folks. Please stay tuned.